Hey guys, I'm Alexa the Great, and now that I think about it, that sounds a little cocky, being that I embarked on this spiritual journey. So I've been a Christian for the majority of my life. I was raised into the religion, and I just recently left at the age of 28 years old. I'm 31 for reference. I just wanted to give some background on how life in the church was for me. Growing up as a kid all the way into my early adult years. Church was a very vulnerable environment, especially during worship time. Everybody was just crying their eyes out, maybe because they felt God's love, and so that emotion overtook them. But as a kid, I feel like I kind of felt like I saw the same people crying. And I don't know if the younger me perceived it as receiving love. I could be wrong, but oftentimes the same people looked like they were in a lot of pain that wouldn't resolve. So it had me questioning, why are these same people breaking down during worship? Or towards the end, when the pastor would do an altar call, the same people going up and asking for prayer. As a little kid, I would just watch this happening and I would say, oh, she's going up again. Didn't we pray for her last week? So it was just a pattern that I recognized. During worship as a kid, I couldn't say I felt God's presence. I knew who God was. I prayed for Jesus to come into my heart, but I never really felt that presence, and I would question it. And because of that, I would often ask for Jesus to come into my heart. And I thought there was something wrong with me because I never felt that, like that, like he came into my heart. So yeah, it felt empty. I couldn't understand it. And because of this fear of heaven and hell, going to hell, as a little kid, you don't want to go to hell. You don't want to be... You don't want to be separate from your parents or your family. You want to be right there with them in the afterlife. So that was a big fear of mine growing up. I made this other video called Breaking Free from Religion, and I discussed this play that my church used to use to evangelize to people out in the streets called Heaven Gates and Hell's Flames. Yeah, it's as scary as it sounds. But if you go watch that video, you'll see like how I give demonstrations on how that play alone was very scary, a little traumatizing. Demons and the devil going on the stage and pulling people away from their families because they drank and they drove and they crashed and now they're going to hell. Yeah, this is what I grew up with, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure if you've grown up in the faith, you've dealt with these fears, these anxieties. How did people make me feel in the church? As a kid, I felt safe. But once I started hitting like the teen years, if I was going through something and I wanted to address it with somebody, let's say it was about boy trouble, right? Like in high school. I never felt safe communicating that to someone in my church, maybe even like a woman, a friend of my mom's, like, because there's always that judging aspect, like maybe, why are you even talking to a boy at your age? Like it was just a feeling. And I know that's like prejudging people, but it was just that feeling. Like there's only so much you can talk about, and there's boundaries that you just can't cross. That's how it feels. It doesn't feel like a genuine exchange. It didn't for me. It just didn't. I remember one lady in particular, anytime she came around and would talk to my mom, I was always just like, very stiff, like couldn't really be myself. It was just, So even as a little kid with my curiosity, I would ask my mom questions as the pastor would preach. I would ask questions like, Mom, if God loves us so much, why did he create a hell for people to suffer for all eternity? Or why are we all punished after Eve ate the fruit? Like, how is that fair to us? And thinking about babies coming out of the womb and saying they are sinners automatically and they're not enough. The whole Christian narrative is that we are broken and we need Jesus to fix us.
We are broken. What must we do to restore our innocence?
And so over time, as that get ingrained in your head, over time, as that is ingrained into your psyche, it's a part of who you are. And you believe you're broken and you believe you need fixing. I never could really comprehend that. Like, how am I a sinner automatically? Like, how come I'm not deserving? How come I need a man to get to God? When there's Bible verses that literally say you are the temple of God. And Jesus never said, I am God, but that's a whole nother conversation. So my mom couldn't answer these questions, and she would respond with, you can ask God when you see him. And that was never enough for me. Yes, I've been a curious girl my whole life. And I'm happy that I've always asked the questions, because my questioning is what got me out of Christianity. Sexuality. Wow, this is going to be a little vulnerable on my end, but maybe there's people like me, of course there is, that can relate. In 4th grade, I had this crush, and I didn't know it as a kid, but looking back, I'm like, yeah, I wanted to be around this girl all the time, okay? And that, I guess it didn't register for me back then, but I knew there was something different. I mean, growing up, I was a tomboy. I played with cars, action figures, and I'm not saying girls who are tomboys automatically means that you're gonna like women when you grow up. I don't know, but like, that was me. I still like boys and all of that stuff, but when I first realized that in 4th grade, I was just like, but I ignored it. I was too young anyway, so I just, continued to be a kid. And it wasn't until after high school where I've dated all the guys, and I never felt that connection. It was just very, like, whatever. Like, the way my friends would talk about their boyfriends was not how I felt about any of my boyfriends. I mean, I loved them, but not in that, like, deeper way. It was more like, I care about you. I care about your well-being. You're fun to hang around. We're like best friends, but it was never deeper than that. So once I realized that, like, this feeling, my sexuality, like, it became more prominent, I felt uncomfortable in my skin, because remember, at this time, I'm still a Christian. I have 2 Christian parents. It just didn't make me feel comfortable in my own skin. And so because of that, I suppressed it. But, after a while, I became a rebel. And like us millennials, during the later 2010s and after, I would go out and drink, go out to the club, truth or dare, spin the bottle. And so that was my time to experiment. And once I realized that I enjoy women, it was just a whole new world for me. And I realized this about myself. And from there, I didn't know what to do with that because of my beliefs. And according to the Bible, it's an abomination. So I would go on to live the next several years doing this in secret, hiding from God, going to church less. There was a period of time where I stopped going to church. And I was doing my own thing. I got into a relationship with a woman in my early 20s. I think I was like 22, 23 years old. And during that time, I just went through a whole I just went through this dark period in my life where I was doing things I shouldn't have been doing. I did drugs. I was drinking. I was often not sober, mainly towards the weekends, because I did work, but that was my life in that relationship, until eventually things got out of control. And my mom told me, hey, come down to Florida, go to school, start over. And so I did that. I hid this part of myself from my parents. My siblings knew, but I never felt comfortable telling my parents because of their beliefs on this whole thing. So this feeling would eventually creep back up. I went on to continue dating women until eventually something shook my world and this anxiety of hell came back. It just said, "Ooh, we're still here." Like, hello. Around 2020, during the pandemic, this was a year of finding myself. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who found themselves in 2020. There was a lot of silence in the world. You're not going out. You're not really being distracted with work. You have all of this time on your hands. What are you going to do with it? So I spent this time reflecting. I started getting into meditating. A good friend of mine introduced me to it, and he opened my world to this like whole new perspective of spirituality, things that happen in the unseen. He basically put me onto metaphysics. And I believe the first book I read by a metaphysical author, Abraham Hicks. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever you think about her, doesn't matter. But this opened my eyes to a whole new concept of the power that we have within. And so because of that, because of the meditating, because of this whole law of attraction thing, I started noticing things in my reality that was a little trippy. I noticed that the things that I would focus on when it came to my desires, they would just come. And during this time, I guess I was like living life on a high. Things were going good. I was finishing up school. I had a few love interests. I felt like I was on top of the world. And so like playing with this mind of mine, like going inside and focusing on things that I would really like to see in my reality would pop up in my reality. And I had my friend to talk about that with. So he was like my journal in a way. And we would have these conversations, a lot of reflecting. And yeah, it kind of opened this like little portal in me that started changing my perception on spirituality as a whole. So after I came down from this high, I spent a lot of time in solitude. I'm talking meditating almost often, every day, journaling. And I found myself feeling pretty much fulfilled. Prior to going through all of this, I did want to get into a very healthy relationship, and that was very hard for me. I think it was based off of my idea of what love is supposed to be. Before I got into all this metaphysical stuff, I was codependent on relationships, on people. Even in my previous relationships, I looked to people to have fun, to distract me. And so, yeah, my partnerships were just more so, I don't want to say on a selfish level because I don't know how that makes sense, but like it was more so a distraction and a way to just let time go by. I know that sounds really messed up. Now that I'm saying it out loud, it is. But eventually I met my current partner, and it's like life kind of orchestrated this to happen. I told you about my meditations, like how my desires would just come into my reality. And I can give several examples, but I'm probably going to save that for another video, with just how magical my life started to become after distancing myself from religion. So I felt like meeting my current girlfriend, life was just like trying to push me towards it. So for example, I was off of dating apps, and if I'm being honest, never had luck on them until one day my sister was like, "Alexa, you should check out Hinge. It's a very mature app and people are on here for the right reasons." So I downloaded it. Mind you, my sister told me to download it several times. I wasn't interested until eventually I was just like, fine, let me see what this app is about. And I ended up meeting my now girlfriend. But after we met, on Hinge, we took it to Instagram. We started having conversations. Conversations got longer. We're talking paragraphs. And then that turned into sending each other voice notes. And then, so I saw there was like this really beautiful exchange just going back and forth. And we could talk about anything and everything. And if I'm being honest, it felt like I was talking to a mirror. Felt like I was talking to myself. Anyways, we meet up for the first time, and when I tell you, that day was so magical. When I first met her, when I stepped into the car, I had butterflies right before meeting her. And as soon as I sat in her car, all of that anxiety disappeared. We held hands. It felt like I knew her for years. It was so weird. I've never felt that with anybody. It felt like I've known her since my childhood. The day went on, and there was synchronicities. If you don't know what a synchronicity is, I will just say it's when things pop up in your reality that you're very familiar with, things that you know, like your spirit is screaming at you, look at this. This is a sign. You know what I mean? Like you have symbolisms that pop up. And so there were a lot of those. I'm not going to get into the details with that. But basically, just meeting her felt like the universe, God, source just orchestrated that whole thing. And I just couldn't deny the genuine love that was there. Over time, like after, being with her and we made it official, I was still struggling with my faith in Christianity. And so I started flirting with atheism. I started looking into the arguments of why atheists are atheists. And I started to see this pattern. This is when I came across deconstruction. Deconstruction was starting to rise. And I'm watching videos on YouTube from Christians who left the faith, which was even more intriguing because in their stories and in their videos, they would just share a lot of similarities with things that I've experienced in the church. So it became my new hobby, just listening to these atheists and agnostics and their arguments towards God. And so it kind of convinced me in a way, because the way they would discuss the Old Testament and point out all of the craziness that is in the Old Testament, it was just like, wow, like I've never seen this God in this light. And so it had me questioning, is this God even real? Because that turned into, where did the Bible even come from? How did it originate? Who are the authors? Where is the historical, archaeological evidence for the stories that happen in the Bible? And as far as I'm concerned, yes, on a geographical level, the places that are in the Bible, yeah, it's historical. But in terms of the stories, where's the archaeological evidence? There isn't any. Some people say that, the ark, the site of the ark was discovered, but where was the ark? Some people say, yeah, this world was definitely flooded. I mean, hello, the world is like, 70% water, 80% water? Floods happen all the time. So I started questioning, is this Bible historical, or is it just a book of stories? And that led me down a little dark path, if I'm being honest, because I found comfort in the afterlife. I found comfort in there being a heaven and me reuniting with everybody after this life. And I don't know what happens after. I don't think nobody does. You have your near-death experiences, but nobody truly knows. So that kind of scared me, because I was just like, okay, well, there might not even be a heaven. But then that also comforted me, because I'm like, there might not even be a hell. And so I did my research into hell. I saw like the origins of the word Gehenna, Sheol, and it didn't necessarily align with the lake of fire, the eternity. So I was like, So I spent a lot of time just like digging into atheism until eventually I came across this man on YouTube. His name is Bill Donahue. He changed my whole perception on the Bible. And to be very clear, he doesn't see the Bible as historical. He sees it as mythological, with deeper spiritual truths. The Bible is very symbolic of how spirit operates. So we have these stories in the Bible that Christians take very literally. And of course, you can see like with their interpretations, the purpose of these stories. Like, for example, Jesus walking on water and Peter coming out to meet him. The water is stormy and Peter is in fear. So as he's walking on the water to meet Jesus, he suddenly starts to drown. And so you would say, like, as a Christian, the moral of the story is have faith. Okay, yeah. No, but the water symbolizes something. Peter symbolizes something. The ship they were on has symbolism. Jesus has symbolism. And so when I saw it from this light, for example, the water representing emotion, that's what water represents, symbolically, emotion. If you're a water sign in the zodiac, you are emotional. You're very sensitive. That's just what it is. If you're air, that's mental. Fire, that's spirit. Like, all of these things mean something. So the stormy waters is drowning in your emotions, letting fear overcome you. And Jesus walking on water, Jesus represents Christ, which means anointing. And so him walking on water means that he is living in the spirit and not letting his flesh overrule him, consume him. And yes, having faith has a lot to do with it. But when you see the story from that lens, it's like, oh my gosh, things started to click for me. I was just like taken aback by the stories he would discuss on his YouTube channel, and I couldn't get enough. It was one thing after another, and it made me realize the Bible makes sense again. And so I ditched atheism, and I'm slowly coming back to there is definitely a creator. And the Bible is definitely true in a lot of ways, just not in the way that I was raised to believe. So this is where things heightened, because once I discovered this new esoteric view on the Bible, that's when I was like, okay, I want to know who this God is. And so I made that my mission. I continued to read the Bible, and no, I didn't believe in heaven and hell still. At least not in the way that Christians believe in it. Bill Donahue is the one who put me on to the kingdom of heaven is within. That's Luke 17:21. And the Bible says that so many times in the Bible. Like you are the temple of God. The temple wasn't built with human hands. We have people going to church thinking that they're in the temple of God, but no, that's just a building built with human hands. The temple of God is the body. So once that changed for me, I'm like, okay, if heaven is within, then where is hell? Here. It's here. And that was very refreshing for me. So I got back into meditating every day after I learned how to meditate in the more spiritual sense, clearing the mind, not letting your thoughts get in the way. And so when you clear your mind, that is when Spirit speaks in silence. There's just a knowing. I'm not talking about literal words, but sometimes that happens, but there's just a knowing. With all of this meditation that I was doing, eventually I got to a deeper place in my practice where I encountered God. I felt for the first time. And when I say God, I'm talking about the God within. I'm not talking about this God that's looking down at everybody. I'm not talking about the God that I was scared of. I feel like that was a direct contradiction to an unconditional loving God. It never sat right with me. So one day I was sitting on my couch meditating, and I got deep into my meditation, and next thing you know, my chest feels like it's opening up, and I feel this warmth, and I feel love. If I can put it into words, love. But it's a lot deeper than that. Words don't do the feeling justice. It just felt like a warm embrace from something I can't even describe with words. After that happened, I knew who God was. God, okay, I said who God was, but God isn't a person. God is not a man. God is not a he or a she. God just is. And when I felt that feeling, that's when I knew. It's like something just opened up. It was like a portal. Like, it was just, wow. After all that time searching, I found God inside of me. Not in a church, not a pastor telling me who God is, not during worship, although I feel like you can find God in anything. God is everywhere, from what I understand now. God is within you. God is within me. If I can argue to atheists about the esoteric teachings of the Bible, I feel like, their perception on God might change. But then you have people who are very realistic. They're realists, people who believe in the material world and not the unseen. But I would just ask you guys, how can this world form from nothing? And why is there so much intelligence? How are we able to sleep at night and breathe on our own without having to think about it? How do babies form in the womb? How did this world begin? It had to have come from a source. And I believe in source. But yeah, I would dedicate a whole video to like my view on God, the Bible. And I feel like it's just life-changing because it's not what we were taught. My camera just stopped recording me, but I just wanted to conclude. Yeah, this is what I want to dedicate my channel to after being on a very long hiatus. This is what interests me, so I want to continue to discuss spirituality, all of the magical things that happen in this world, the awakening, and also just content about life after leaving the church and commentary. So if this is your jam and this is what you enjoy listening to, subscribe, like the video. That would really help me out a lot so I can continue to grow. I will catch you guys in the next video.